New report just out this morning from ProPublica detailing 3 instances in which Warren Buffett, who's been on this program many a time, privately traded in stocks that Berkshire Hathaway was buying and selling.
Everyone loves Warren Buffett. Every person that's into investing practically orgasms to his advice.
Oracle of Omaha, building his image and having some fun.
Put your money into the S&P 500 and wait. Diversify. You just gotta analyze financial statements, find good companies, invest into them at the right price, and eventually you'll be magically rich like me. When in reality, Warren Buffett is a complete hypocrite and just does insider trading, or more specifically front running, allegedly. Quote, on at least 3 occasions, Buffett has traded stocks in his personal account in the same quarter or the quarter before Berkshire bought or sold shares of the same companies, doing so before the conglomerate's moves were disclosed to the public. Why is this a big deal? Because when you run one of the biggest entities in the world, Berkshire Hathaway, is the 8th most valuable company. Whenever Berkshire Hathaway buys or sells stock, the price of the stock is gonna really move because they're just buying or selling so many shares at once. So it looks like Warren over here did some insider trading before those trades were disclosed to the public, kinda like Nancy Pelosi. And these are just the 3 occasions we know about. See, the reason why insider trading is illegal is because it works. In fact, doing sketchy stuff like insider trading is the only thing that works on Wall Street, and everyone there knows this. And yet all of us were fooled into believing that somehow Warren Buffett is the greatest investor of all time by doing everything by the book. And that's why even though this insider trading has been exposed, do you think Warren Buffett will ever face any consequences? Do you think he'll ever see the inside of a jail cell like you and I would if we insider traded? Of course not. Why? Because Warren Buffett has mastered the art of public image. Warren Buffett is not some greedy capitalist billionaire that made his wealth thanks to sketchy stuff like insider trading. No, he's a jolly old man that eats McDonald's every day, that drives the same old car and lives in the same old house. He doesn't care about money. He's not some greedy pig. He's a philanthropist. He donates so much of his wealth. He's gonna donate all of it when he dies.
A remarkable decision tonight from one of the richest men in the world. Mega billionaire Warren Buffett says he is giving away most of his fortune to charity.
Buffett has pledged to give away the bulk of his fortune to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and giving more than 15% of his money to foundations started by his 3 children and his late wife Susan.
He's a man of ethics, of morals.
We're looking at him as a moral compass.
How could anyone go after this jolly old Santa Claus figure? That is why he never gets into trouble. Even though if you take 5 seconds to look at his past, he has literally contributed to the destruction of society in his climb to billions. From getting the world addicted to cigarettes and Coca-Cola, they're literally the biggest shareholder of Coca-Cola, not just some passive investor, to fueling a global financial crisis in 2008 by being the largest shareholder in the credit rating agency Moody's that made the crisis possible. And much, much more that we're gonna expose in this documentary. And yet when you think of the name Warren Buffett, do any of these evil acts come to mind? No. So you just don't get to billions of dollars by being a jolly generous old man that just cares about the world so much. No, you get to billions of dollars by being more greedy and more vicious than everyone else. Every rich person knows this in private. But the problem is, in this world, if you display your greed, if you're open about your viciousness, the masses will hate you and find some excuse to send you to prison. That's why Warren Buffett has put in so much effort, so much thought into crafting this perfect public image.
If you look at the history of Warren Buffett in terms of just his actions, and you separate that from this fake personality that he's created, and you can even see there's plenty of people privately who sort of come out and saying that he's a ruthless type of person privately, but if you put that aside, I mean, just look at his actions, what you see is probably the most impressive fraudster I've ever seen in my life and the sketchiest guy I've ever seen. He advocates for things that are traditionally seen as evil, like he advocates for like price gouging and like becoming a monopoly, all this stuff that you would see as an evil capitalist, but because he puts on a vibe of a jolly Santa Claus, you don't see it as a bad thing.
We're back with Arvid Ali, the former president of Jordan Belfort's companies, just the real wolf of Wall Street. He's been an advisor to an attorney general, professional athletes, and some of the richest people on the planet. So he knows what the ultra wealthy are actually like in private. If you thought Elizabeth Holmes was crazy for going to such crazy lengths to convince the public that she was the female Steve Jobs by making her voice lower to her outfits, well, this is actually a very normal thing for public figures to do, except she was an amateur at it because it was too forced. Everyone caught onto it and she went to prison. But Warren Buffett, he is the true master at this. And if you want money, if you want power, if you want influence, then this is something you're gonna need to master as well. So stay dangerous and let's get into it. One thing all rich people have in common is that they all have financial advisors. Even though they can pick and choose investments on their own if they wanted to, rich people understand that when it comes to preserving and growing their wealth, it's less about how smart you are and it's more about not making stupid emotional decisions that blow all your money. And that is why you need a certified financial advisor. The problem is, finding an advisor is tricky. A lot of them act like they have your best interests at heart when really they don't. But luckily, that is where Money Pickle comes in, today's paid sponsor. With Money Pickle, you can book a free Zoom call with one of their certified planners or fiduciaries, you can explain your situation to them in a few words, and Money Pickle will match you with the perfect expert for you. On your video call, they'll be able to really understand your situation and give you tailor-made advice just for you. You can ask them about investing, taxes, IRAs, 401ks, or any other financial concerns you have as a US resident. Think of it as getting to talk to your own personal AI, but you know it's a real person who's certified in the stuff and has a legal responsibility to act in your best interests. So click the link below and schedule your free call now. There's a ton of times to choose from, so you'll find a slot no matter your schedule. Just click the link below and book your call now. So you're Warren Buffett. Ever since childhood, you've made it your goal to get rich. You are obviously an extremely smart kid, but you know, most geniuses are usually very socially awkward. And once you graduated business school, you quickly found out that intellect is only half of the battle. That it doesn't matter how big of a genius you are if people don't like you.
For example, communication skills. I tell the students that come, they're going to graduate schools and business and they're learning all these complicated formulas and all that. If they just learn to communicate better, and both in writing and in person, they increase their value at least 50%.
He was not really well adjusted.
Anyone who sort of studies him and loves him, they all kind of know that he went through Dale Carnegie training in order to become a good public speaker and become likable. And if you actually follow what he says, he always talks about the requirement of becoming a lovable person. He was pretty open about the fact that he architected this public personality of becoming very likable and lovable, really. But no one really takes 2 seconds to think beyond what that actually means.
I had the intellect to succeed, but I did not have the persona.
You realize the whole game of being an investor and having an investment fund is how trustworthy and likable you are, much more than your actual investments. That's very secondary to the situation.
So you poured every ounce of your being into becoming the most likable, trustworthy person on Wall Street. You knew that as long as you present yourself as a likable, trustworthy genius, their money is going to be yours. But even more than that, if people perceive you as a likable, trustworthy rich guy, it won't matter how ruthless you are behind the scenes. It won't matter if you invest in the most harmful industries out there. It will not matter how much damage you cause to society. You will be able to get away with all of it.
I don't think smoking's good for you, but I've owned cigarette bonds.
As Warren Buffett, you know that addiction is very, very good for business. You've seen how successful the tobacco industry is. You respect the game. You even invested in a few tobacco companies yourself. But then the public started worrying about pesky problems like lung cancer and death. Suddenly, being in bed with big tobacco would be enough to turn everyone against you. There was no way you could risk your reputation and likability on that, and that's when you turned your attention to Coca-Cola. If you think about it, Coca-Cola is the perfect investment. It's insanely addictive, it's a monopoly, and Coca-Cola is willing to do anything to maintain that monopoly, like selling their sugary drinks for the same price as water in poor countries. But the problem is, if you say any of the stuff out loud like monopoly or addiction, it's gonna make you look like an evil capitalist. So you gotta use some nicer sounding words like moat. A great business should have a monopoly, a moat.
What are the key indicators you look for within companies before making an investment?
Well, I look for something that does give them a moat around it.
And by the time the 1987 stock market crash happened, you saw your opportunity to buy in. Today, Buffett is the biggest shareholder in Coca-Cola. He isn't just some passive investor in Coca-Cola, he is Coca-Cola, which makes him connected to all their misdeeds.
So obviously Coca-Cola, their main focus is to make it so that the world drinks Coca-Cola instead of water as their main competitor. They always the companies he pours money into, they're either sketchy in terms of they're scamming people or they're very sketchy in terms of getting people addicted to harmful products.
Buffett is also currently the biggest shareholder in Kraft Heinz at a staggering 26%. Kraft Heinz is behind only the healthiest brands that definitely aren't addictive. But addiction is just one half of your business model. Thanks to your pristine public image, you're also able to get involved in the sketchiest of companies without ever getting into trouble.
It
is the kind of scandal that rocks Wall Street and raises questions about the integrity of our financial institutions.
With the giant securities firm of Solomon Brothers under investigation for improper trading of treasury bonds.
The powerful players in the $2.2 trillion treasuries market were replaced by Omaha billionaire Warren Buffett. Buffett, whose company Berkshire Hathaway put $700 million into Solomon in 1987, will now step in as chairman and CEO of the firm.
Today we accept the resignations of John Goodfriend and Tom Strauss.
Earlier today, the U.S. Treasury Department announced that it had suspended Solomon Brothers from participating in the auction of new issues. But apparently, when Chairman Buffett heard the news, he personally called Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady, telling him such action would be harmful to his firm and assuring him that he would cooperate fully with a government investigation. Late today, the Treasury Department rescinded its decision, leaving Solomon a primary dealer in the government securities market.
It takes 20 years to build a reputation, and it takes 5 minutes to lose it.
1991, Solomon Brothers. Solomon Brothers was one of the legendary elite multinational investment banks. They were the most profitable, the most cutthroat, and everyone knew about them. And they had a huge impact on Wall Street. In fact, they were the ones that first developed the private mortgage-backed security in the late 1980s, the thing that made the 2008 housing bubble possible. But it all came apart in 1990. The bank was found to be submitting fake bids on US Treasury securities. Their goal was to corner the Treasury markets. The SEC found out and fined them the biggest fine against the bank at the time, $290 million. And guess who was heavily involved in Solomon Brothers? That's right, the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett. But thankfully, since you have the most pristine reputation possible, you were able to step into Solomon Brothers, testify before Congress, sway Congress with your words, and save the day.
Lose money for the firm and I will be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm and I will be ruthless.
Most people believe you saved Wall Street, while others said you sold your morals for $700 million by investing in Solomon Brothers in the first place. But that didn't matter. You became a hero in an industry full of frauds and scammers. But Solomon Brothers was just the beginning. Moody's. Moody's is what's known as a credit rating agency. They were the ones that gave great ratings to those mortgage-backed securities that everyone was investing into, even though underneath, those mortgage-backed securities were complete trash. So Moody's were at the literal heart of the 2008 financial crisis. And guess who owned the biggest stake in Moody's? Warren Buffett. You owned over 13% of Moody's at the time.
Yes, in fact, he's been subpoenaed to be here today at the New School in downtown Manhattan, and he is here to discuss his ownership of about a 13% stake in Moody's, the ratings agency, which is very much at the center of course, the financial crisis.
But while everyone else was getting fooled by their ratings, you didn't even use Moody's ratings at all.
Pierre, why do you own the largest stake of any shareholder in Moody's, which is the ratings agency that Warren so badly got these credit ratings wrong on so many levels that eventually blew up in the faces of investors? You being the largest shareholder, what was so attractive to you about Moody's when you don't even use their product?
Well, we are forced to use it in terms of our own ratings. I don't use it in terms of making my own credit judgments about other credits.
That's what I'm talking about.
But Moody's was far from the only way you were at the center of the 2008 financial crisis. You were also involved with the angels at Goldman Sachs.
As Mr. Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, the man whose words are watched by everybody on Wall Street, spends $5 billion to invest in Goldman Sachs. The question is he catching a falling knife, or have we hit the bottom?
After the housing bubble burst and everything imploded, Goldman Sachs looked doomed. There was no way they were going to save their reputation or business after taking advantage of millions of people like that, so that is where you stepped in.
He's giving over $5 billion in return for a 10% dividend. In addition to that, he has the right to buy an additional $5 billion worth of stock at a massive discount. So it's probably going to be a good deal for Warren Buffett.
And with $3 billion in profits, it turned out to be a very good deal for you.
So if you look at the Goldman Sachs deal, he ended up getting a lot more money than any sort of passive investor would. And generally speaking, he gets involved with these companies. And very similar to the corporate raiders and the activist investors of the past, he just gets involved in such a way where he figures out how to make the company make a lot more money, which oftentimes requires doing a lot of questionable things, both ethically and legally. But unlike the corporate raiders of the 1980s, who all ended up going to jail, Warren Buffett kept this pristine, positive public reputation. And every time he gets investigated for something, magically because of his vibe, more than anything else, he just doesn't get in trouble over and over again.
And let's not forget about Wells Fargo. When they were struggling during the housing crisis, all you had to do was sing their praises, and their stocks rose by 13% in one day. You were a major shareholder, you had to have known all the bad stuff that was going on inside, but because you displayed your faith in Wells Fargo, so did everyone else. And then you proceeded to sell all your own private shares the following day. And keep in mind, Wells Fargo was one of the sketchiest banks of them all. They would open accounts without customers' consents. Employees were encouraged to open lines of credit using their own contact information so customers wouldn't be notified. They were even withdrawing funds from real accounts in order to manage the fake ones, all in an effort to steal money from customers in the form of fees. And when they finally got in trouble in 2016, you were in trouble too, because Berkshire Hathaway was still a major shareholder. But once again, thanks to your glowing reputation, smoothing things over was easy. All you had to do was say,
A, it's a wonderful bank, and it's going to do very well over time. And secondly, I've made a lot of money buying American Express after I had a different kind of problem, but after I had a huge company shaking problem. I bought Geico after it almost expired when it had enormous problems because they made a mistake. So there are mistakes going on in Berkshire right now. The problem is catching them when they're early and doing something about it.
And just like magic, the public worry evaporated, and it was back to business as usual for you. Over and over again, Warren Buffett would always find himself embroiled in the scummiest of companies, and yet somehow he would always come out on top without ever getting into any trouble like any of us would if we did any of these same things.
So realistically, what he does is he gets involved in companies which are extremely sort of the worst of the worst companies you could imagine. So he got involved with Moody's before the 2008 financial crisis. He gets involved with Goldman Sachs right after, and then he gets involved with Wells Fargo. That gets into a big scandal. He gets involved with Coca-Cola, and then they, sort of poison the rest of the world. He keeps doing this over and over again, where he finds companies that are already sketchy with what they do, and somehow he makes them 10 times sketchier. And it's no coincidence. And the amazing thing that he's pulled off is calling himself a passive investor. He just sits there, he's saying, I just sit there and I read, and I just read all day, and I just find really great companies, and I just pour a bunch of money into them. But, I'm just like everybody else. I'm just a reader. Do you love reading?
Who is this guy here?
Warren Buffett.
All right.
I read about him that he graduated from college at 20 years old with over $10,000.
He started investing at a very young age, and now he's one of the richest persons in the world.
She encourages her campers to act like Buffett. From his daily routine,
he reads 6 hours a day.
And so it works super well with what moms want to tell their kids, why don't you read more? Then you could be successful.
I'm actually in the process of getting a stock next week.
Which one?
The Berkshire Hathaway.
I think investors who own Berkshire Hathaway, they see themselves as a part of a community. There are more long-term holders of Berkshire than any company. People consider it a religion.
Bobby, you told us you weren't sure that you'd still be alive if it weren't for Warren Buffett. That's a pretty incredible statement.
Yeah, it's true.
Here is the thing about Warren Buffett. He's created a true cult-like following. Every investor, every CEO, every C-suite executive hangs on his every word.
You're obviously an incredible investor, but when I've asked you in the past what you'd like to be remembered for, you've said you want to be remembered as a teacher.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I've gotten so much from other teachers.
Which means whenever you, as Warren Buffett, invest in one of these companies like Coca-Cola, for example, you are going to make sure their executives apply all your ruthless business tactics to increase their profits.
This is kind of the funny thing about him, is his principles he says publicly, and inherently what the principles actually are, the most evil type of principles you could have, for example, with price gouging.
We like buying businesses where we feel that there's some untapped pricing power.
And so he always talks about pricing power. He's obsessed with pricing power for a company. Like, how do you keep increasing your prices more and more and more? And then, of course, his portfolio companies follow in his philosophy. And, they very regularly do meet with him privately, and there's plenty of evidence for this.
He used to come to board meetings with about 20 annual reports, and he would take me through these annual reports. I mean, it was like going to business school with Warren Buffett.
He does play an active role in meeting with the management of these different companies and making sure that they are implementing the Berkshire Hathaway principles, so to speak. But even if they don't, at the very least, the second anyone actually employs, what he requires in terms of his business philosophy, they very quickly end up doing something very illegal or something extremely unethical at the very least.
Martin Shkreli is the perfect example.
Imagine for a moment popping a pill before bed that costs about $13.50. Now imagine waking up the next morning, find that the price of the exact same pill jumped to $750 overnight.
I want to ask you a few questions. What do you say to that single pregnant woman who might have AIDS, no income, and she needs Daraprim in order to survive? What do you say to her when she has to make that choice? What do you say to her?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Do you think you've done anything wrong?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Martin Shkreli, as he said in his, I think it was at Harvard University when he gave a lecture after he started to get into a lot of controversy, he started to say publicly, like, hey, I'm just a Warren Buffett disciple.
Some people ask me, how could you be so evil? Where'd you learn this from? Well, learn from the best. Warren Buffett, in fact, gloats over and over again about his See's Candy investment. If you know anything about Buffett, you know that See's Candy is one of those most prized investments. And Buffett explained to people that every time he raised prices of See's Candy, he was shocked to see that demand didn't drop. And I remember the moment where I realized that, reading this story, that this is exactly what pharmaceuticals is all about. Demand will basically be constant no matter what the price is.
We have a company called See's Candy out on the West Coast. See's Candy is boxed chocolates. If you give a box of See's chocolates to your girlfriend on the first date and she kisses you, we own you. You know, I mean, we can raise the price tomorrow and you'll buy the same box. You're not going to fool around with success. So the key there is the response. You do not want to go home on Valentine's Day and say to your wife or your sweetheart, preferably they're the same person, you don't say, here, honey, I took the low bid. It doesn't work.
But unlike Warren Buffett, the problem with Martin Shkreli is that he never got the memo. See, most people think Warren Buffett's #1 rule is to never lose money, but that's just not true. Warren Buffett's actual #1 rule that he keeps in private is that you gotta be likable. And Martin Shkreli was just not likable, so he ended up in prison while Buffett walks free.
He says to do this, and I literally just did what he said to do, which is to maximize how much you charge as much as you possibly can, and then you benefit from it. And of course, as soon as he does it, he ends up in jail. And as soon as other people start to do it and take him literally, they end up in jail, or they at least end up in some sort of investigation. When you ask the question of how involved is he with these companies, it's a good question. And the only real answer is he is publicly, advising the executives of these companies. That's what we know for a fact. But at the same time, we have no idea what he's doing behind the scenes, which is what the ProPublica thing proves. And he's been able to do this over and over again until finally, he's in his 90s now. And it took ProPublica looking at his IRS, tax filings to actually see that at the very least, there's hard evidence that in at least 3 occasions, he did commit insider trading.
And that's the beauty of Warren Buffett's strategy. He provides the sketchy advice, he doesn't directly do the sketchy stuff himself, but he still gets the profit thanks to being a passive investor that everyone loves and worships. But why? Why is your vibe, for lack of a better term, so important in this world? So can you explain to people why the vibe is? Because most people grow up thinking if you break the law, then you're gonna go to jail, you're gonna get found guilty. But are you saying that the law is a lot more flexible based on your vibe or something?
Let's say when you see a sketchy looking guy, walking into a store, he obviously gets very scrutinized. And then if he does anything wrong, they'll try to catch him because at the end of the day, he's giving off a very sketchy vibe. It's very straightforward. Versus if you see some very innocent looking, individual who's just happy and is just going about their day and maybe they make a mistake, whatever. No one thinks twice about the situation. And if you sort of take that analogy into the sort of elite world of law enforcement and sort of corporate investigations, all this stuff, it doesn't actually change. At the end of the day, us as human beings like to believe that we are personally really good people. And we wouldn't want to go to jail ourselves because we think we're good people. So if we find somebody else and we think that, oh, that's also a good person, any action that they reasonably do, as long as we can put ourselves into their shoes, we think to ourselves okay, I don't want to punish this person because they're just being a good, innocent person with good intentions and they're good to go. The moment that we get to categorize somebody as an evil person, like, oh, this is a sketchy person, or this person's inconsiderate, or this person seems angry, or whatever it might be, the moment we really categorize this person as a threat in any way, our immediate reaction is we need to separate them from the rest of society. Whether it's jail or it's any other form of exile traditionally throughout history, nothing's really changed. So when you look at the law, the actual technical law, as any elite lawyer will say, barely matters at all. It really matters. Who is this person? What's their reputation? What's their vibe? What's the vibe of the lawyer that represents them? What's the relationship that the lawyer has with the judge, or how good is the lawyer at communicating in the right way to the jury? All of these random things, that actually is what matters. And so same thing applies to pretty much anyone like Martin Shkreli. They just wanted to see him in jail. Whereas with Warren Buffett, people really don't want to see that type of person in jail, because what he stands for is very positive and very reflective of what is really wholesome, and people want to teach their kids, hey, you can be really successful with it like this guy, but you don't need to be spending money lavishly. You don't need to, brag about it. You just need to be really smart and study and just read books all day and just keep reading and reading and reading and reading. And the more you read, the more you'll get rewarded. And that's sort of a picture perfect frame that everybody wants to agree with, and nobody wants to see that shattered, really.
And that is why Warren Buffett will always get away with it. That's why he's so obsessed with showing off that he drives a normal car, lives in a normal house, and eats McDonald's every day.
What Warren Buffett did really well is simply show that, like, oh, I'm just a regular person. So the number one criticism that people have of billionaires really is just that they're jealous of them. Like, at the heart of it, people say that they're evil and this and that. And, in fact, like, a lot of things that they did are very sketchy. But most of where people are frustrated tends to be that they're upset about their own lives and they can't tolerate seeing somebody else, living so lavishly. And so Warren Buffett did a good job making his number one branding and marketing that he just lives a poor person's lifestyle. But realistically, there are a lot of multi-billionaires that could show this. And a lot of celebrities I know, they just live at their girlfriend's house. Like, they don't actually live in these like luxurious like mansions and stuff. If you go to the nicest houses throughout Los Angeles, they're almost all empty. It's universally the case. Like, if you go to those super mega mansions, they're almost always empty. They're just there for whatever reason that the person ended up having to buy it. But like, at the end of the day, the actual lifestyle of most of these super wealthy people isn't luxurious at all. So what Warren Buffett did, I think, sort of as a good job, is he tried to really shock people by showing like, oh wow, look, I don't live luxuriously at all. But in truth, most people who are rich, they just don't either. So yeah, I would say that like the key thing though is like the reason he picked that out of all things to show is mostly just to allow people to love him. And he keeps saying this over and over again, you have to be lovable, you have to be lovable. Like, that's the whole key. And especially if you're trusting people with your money, or people are putting their life savings into Berkshire Hathaway or whatever it might be, you want to give that money to someone that you really like and trust and respect as some genius. That's the last key thing, is they need to show themselves as like a really intelligent person, because otherwise, how can you justify to yourself, like, why is it that I can't just invest this money? I need to respect the fact that this is some genius. And I need to not be jealous of him or her. And so it's nice to see that they're not, living lavishly. And I need to see that they're super wealthy already and they speak, in a sophisticated way. There's enough things that I can finally go to sleep at night, being proud of myself that I gave all my life savings to this random guy that I've never met before. So the funny thing is, I've never really seen that people who love Warren Buffett have actually spent time with him privately, so like it's like a weird thing where everyone is obsessed with it. You guys don't even know who he is. You've never spent even one lunch with these people, and you've experienced this too, Jake. Like, the multi-billionaire people that we've had dinner with, their public persona is almost exact opposite to their private persona. So that's universally the case, I would say.
Arvid has been my advisor for years. He's the one that taught me how to scale my whole operation over here. I can't recommend him enough. So click the card on the screen to watch his video now and subscribe to his channel. This is best for people who have a 9 to 5, or if you're a solopreneur looking to scale while working less. Click the card on the screen to watch now.